Hello and welcome everyone to Jelim's Storytime episode 7. I am today continuing on with the book The Blood King, which is the first book in the Frey Desolation Trilogy. It is a book that I worked on quite a few years ago. I haven't had a chance to go back to it yet, and I am kind of going through it as I do these for Storytime. Let me know what you think of the book. If you have not been with us for the previous 3 episodes, I suggest you go back to listen to those first. I will link the prologue up the top of the screen and the other chapters 1 and 2 in the description below as well. So, thank you very much for joining me again, and I hope that you enjoy chapter 3. Chapter 3. Vincent e Lorenzo had frozen in disbelief at the mention of the binding. It had been nearly 400 years since that ancient spell had last been talked of in the supernatural world. Vincent may not have been a patient man, but had been waiting a very long time for it to be mentioned again, and now that it finally had, he was not going to let such an opportunity go to waste. Dyer House on the outskirts of Blue Valley was more than adequate for his taste. You'd think with eternity that Vincent would get bored with period architecture, but the truth was he loved every bit of it. Watching his many sire arrange the furniture in his new home, he smirked and made his way to the main door. "I'll be back in 2 hours. I expect this place to be spotless." Blue Valley was by no means a new place to Vincent. He had been once a very long time ago for the very same reason he was here now. Blue Valley held something that Vincent wanted. Besides, any chance to screw over the Capricorn Coven was an opportunity worth taking in Vincent's eyes. They'd only made life for him difficult, and he was more than willing to ruin whatever it was they were cooking up this time. But now they had announced that they were able to perform a most prized and powerful ancient spell once more, and Vincent, despite the danger of them seeking revenge, planned on getting what he wanted out of them. Strolling onto the main street, Vincent couldn't help but pick up a familiar scent. He crossed the road towards it, a car repair garage standing before him with a few men working on the cars. He ignored them as he came to one car in particular, looking at the feet that poked out from under it. They seemed so still, and after a few seconds, the board rolled out revealing a face that Vincent hadn't seen in nearly 100 years. Well, it seems the Capricorn Coven knew damn well what they were doing when they announced to the supernatural population that they were going to perform the most powerful spell ever created, said Vincent. "Been a long time, Vincent," spoke Lawrence Frey, his short dark hair and sharp facial features looking at Vincent with a caution that Vincent felt was necessary for the wiser ones who knew him. "I do believe it was the beginning of the Great War the last time we met," stated Vincent. "Such a dramatic time." "Yes, well, I suppose it didn't help that you were selling out countries this way and that," said Lawrence accusingly. "Oh, I took care of it eventually," Vincent shrugged. "I don't think siding with the Germans counted as taking care of things at the time," Lawrence replied. He sat up and wiped the grease from his hands. "What do you want, Vincent?" "Well, my official agenda involves making the Capricorn Coven's life a living hell," said Vincent. "But I figured I could make you and your brother a part of that as well for more entertainment value." "Dimitri and I are not here because of the Coven," said Lawrence. "We're here because despite all the bad luck it has given us over the years, this is our home." "Honourable to the end," said Vincent with a smirk. "But I have a feeling that your brother just won't be able to help himself when it comes to causing trouble. He always was good at starting things he couldn't finish." Lawrence sighed as he watched Vincent leave the garage. "Give my best to Dimitri." Vincent e Lorenzo, thought Lawrence. I would have been happy to not cross paths with him again for the rest of eternity. The year had been 1808. To put it simply, Lawrence had not desired to be amongst the revelries of the rich folk. but Dimitri had insisted he come upon the account that the whiskey was better. They'd come together for Lawrence's 220th birthday, an occasion he didn't think was worth celebrating since he'd become undead, but Dimitri was always up for a reason to celebrate with alcohol. To this day, Lawrence still didn't know why he bothered. It took an incredible amount for him to even get tipsy, let alone drunk. If he happened to have some blood in the middle of it, he sobered up rather quickly. Appraising the elaborately decorated and well-built ballroom of the large estate, Lawrence couldn't help but smile when he noticed the beautiful stone carvings of an artist he was familiar with, if only because Kelsey had insisted on commissioning Voltaire when remodelling her French apartments a decade back. A light giggling caught his ear and he turned to see a group of young ladies, barely 18, smiling at him. They bowed their heads to him and he did the same for them out of politeness. He may have wanted to be anywhere else, but that didn't mean he would act like it. An arm swung around his shoulders, the familiar scent of his brother wafting over him. "See, I told you it would be worth it to come here," Dimitri grinned, smiling over at the young ladies. Lawrence hummed a reply that neither confirmed nor denied his brother's statement. "I still don't see how you got an invitation for this evening. Do you even know who owns this estate?" Dimitri shrugged. "I don't see why that matters. You didn't glamour anyone, did you?" It could get complicated if his brother had done that. A vampire's ability to erase or alter memories had its limits. It had to be short-term, and eventually it would wear off. There was a reason their kind had become known as the stuff of nightmares. "Come on, we'll go and attract some company," his brother avoided the question. Lawrence sighed. "You go ahead, I'm quite satisfied where I am." Not really, but Lawrence had never been able to deny his younger siblings anything, even on his own birthday. Dimitri grinned. "You must be in a good mood. You're not even giving me the 'if Kelsey was here' speech." "Do you want me to give that speech?" asked Lawrence. "You've never actually listened to it before." Dimitri shrugged. "I listen. That does not, however, translate to changes in my charming demeanour." Dimitri gave a sly grin to his brother before abandoning him for the young women. Only Dimitri could ever get away with approaching women that way, so straightforward and lacking in etiquette, yet charming and smooth. Lawrence rolled his eyes and took another sip of the wine. "It's rare I see siblings by birth in our kind, rather than siblings by sire." The dark aura that had crept up behind Lawrence startled him. He spun to face the newcomer, filling Lawrence's keen sense of smell with the threat. He was a vampire, all right. And older than Lawrence and Dimitri were, much older. It was rare they came across others of their kind. It did happen, of course, but they never really got along. Lawrence and Dimitri were not trained by a sire, a rarity among vampires. It was for this reason that there were certain social interactions that the two were not very good at compared to their brethren. The concept of vampiric elders was one. The old vampire's eyes were an electric violet, standing out amongst his pale skin and white blonde hair. He was so graceful as he moved that one could not help but be entranced by it. It seemed to be a miracle that none of the humans around them had noticed his otherworldliness. In that dark, smooth and silent aura, there was a danger to him that Lawrence could only describe as deadly. As he came to stand beside Lawrence, he gave a small smirk of amusement. "I didn't think I'd find the guards out front in a glamour. This region is rather quiet of undead activities. I picked it for that reason," he stated slowly. "I was not aware the territory was claimed," Lawrence stated cautiously. "My brother and I will leave should you desire it." The vampire's smirk widened. "Such dull senses for you to not realise whose land you've strolled onto." Lawrence sensed he was no longer talking about the act of trespassing as the worst of the brothers' crimes. Rather, the old vampire was surprised he had yet to be recognised. Lawrence scented the air subtly, only to find his eyes widening in surprise. The scent was not one he could have recognised straight away. He had indeed never met this vampire before, but underneath the scent of the vampire lay its uniqueness, a uniqueness that Lawrence and Dimitri shared with him. "You are our sire." The old vampire smiled. I didn't think Juliana would have the guts to use the blood I gave her. Never on her own sons. I suppose those empathic witches are just full of surprises, though. You know who we are? Lawrence asked. This is going to be fun, the vampire grinned. Fun would not be the word that Lawrence would use to describe the following 2 weeks spent at the estate in northern England, though Dimitri had certainly had the time of his life. When Lawrence finally had the opportunity to leave, he took it, his brother electing to stay longer. Lawrence would never know what happened to Dimitri in those few months he had spent with Vincent and Lorenzo, but whatever it had been, Dimitri had never been quite the same again. What do you mean he's here? Asked Dimitri in outrage as Lawrence explained the events of earlier that day. I mean exactly what I said Lawrence. He's taken up residence at Dyer House. Apparently he's here to make a mess of the coven, but has no problem if we're collateral damage. Dimitri sighed and walked to the liquor cabinet, opening the glass doors. I really don't like that guy. Neither of us do, said Lawrence. But we're going to have to stay as far away as possible from the conflict that's about to erupt. That might not be an option, said Dimitri cautiously. Lawrence sighed. Please tell me you didn't start something. The little witch approached me, defended Dimitri. Seemed pretty threatening. Said the witches were going to perform the binding. They can't. There aren't any male witches that have been born into the coven, said Lawrence. No, said Dimitri, but both of us are here without protection, and I have no doubt that they've come up with some absurd ceremony to sacrifice us anyway, despite our vampiric nature. Lawrence sighed. We can't deal with this on our own. Dimitri turned to his brother with an unconvinced expression. She asked not to be disturbed, said Dimitri. I know, said Lawrence, but we don't have a choice. You know we stand no chance against the entire coven and Vincent. Dimitri sighed, holding up his hands in a sign of surrender. Well, I'm not calling her. Lawrence pulled out his phone and dialed the number he dreaded just as much as loved calling. It only rang twice before she picked up. Hello, came the light voice from the other end. I'm sorry, Lawrence said carefully, but we need your help. There was a sigh on the other end of the line before the voice returned, less cheerful this time. I'm on my way. Well, that's it, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Storytime. I would love to hear what you think in the comments. I might pose a couple of questions this time to get the discussion going. So, first off, how do you think this mysterious sister is going to react when she arrives? And second, why do you think Vincent is so intent on getting revenge on the coven? So, with those questions, I hope that will start some discussion below, and I will see you next time for another chapter. Bye.